The story kicks off in a world that got a serious system update called Awakening. In some godforsaken frozen wasteland, a bunch of heavy hitters were gathered, all staring at the Death Den. A top-tier S-rank dungeon, basically the final boss stage for some ancient, grumpy entity. This place, the very first dungeon to pop up on planet Azure, had a 0% clear rate for decades. Its entrance was less of a doorway and more of a welcome mat, made of skeletons from so-called masters who never made it back. But today, the script was getting flipped. A lone wolf warrior named Suming decided to solo the whole thing. After a ridiculously epic fight, he actually walked out the winner, having just deleted the dungeon's god-tier boss from existence. But at the exit, totally out of mana, he wasn't greeted with cheers and a parade. Nope, he got jumped by the very guys he used to call his party members, who had him completely boxed in. Their intentions were painfully obvious. One of them sneered, telling Suming to stop struggling and cough up that shiny new divine artifact he'd just looted. Another one chimed in, declaring his fate was already sealed, game over. He sarcastically dubbed him the hero of humanity and promised a quick trip to the respawn screen if he just surrendered. Suming, with leftover energy practically sparking off him, finally put two and two together. He figured out their brilliant strategy. Let him do all the hard work, then gank him at the exit for the epic teardrop. He had to ask, seriously? Was this your grand master plan from the very beginning? From the crowd of traitors, a blonde pretty boy named Zhang Tong strutted forward, oozing arrogance. He dramatically drew his sword, which, of course, pulsed with edgy blue lightning. He made it official, squaring up against the guy he once called a friend. He demanded the divine artifact, then had the audacity to play the friendship card, offering to spare Suming's life in exchange for it. Smirking like a classic villain, Zhang Tang boasted that he would just mop the floor with what little power Suming had left. Gripping his own sword, which blazed like a miniature sun, Suming cursed himself for being so incredibly naive. He had treated these backstabbers like brothers since they were all just low-level noobs. They'd fought side by side for years, and he never once suspected their poisonous, two-faced nature. Filled with the bitter taste of betrayal, he decided he wasn't about to get spawn-camped without a fight. He raised his weapon, letting the divine artifact unleash a cataclysmic eruption of red and purple energy. The resulting explosion was absolutely massive. Standing there defiantly, like a total boss, Suming taunted his former crew, yelling that if they wanted his Ring of Tao Defiance so badly, they could come and try to take it. But he seriously doubted any of them had high enough stats for the job. The sheer power flex of his last stand left his old allies completely stunned and speechless. One of Zhang Tang's impatient goons started getting antsy, urging the group to just finish Suming off. But Zhang Mong, the slightly smarter one, advised a bit of caution. Everyone and their mother warned Suming not to get cocky with his shiny new artifact. Just as the epic staring contest was reaching its peak, a new player decided to crash the party from the sky. Suming, they yelled. He glanced up, completely baffled, as a pink-haired woman named Xiao Man made a beeline for him. She then latched onto him with the force of a homing missile. I heard some losers were plotting against you and I got so worried, she cried. Suming, bless his naive soul, reassured her. He puffed out his chest and told her everything was fine, that these chumps were barely a warm-up. Still, a little voice in his head was screaming, but how in the world did they get my exact coordinates? As he was thinking this, Zhang Tong flashed a smirk that screamed, I know something you don't. In that exact moment, Suming felt a very sharp, very unpleasant sensation in his back. Surprise. Xiao Man had just stabbed him. She whispered sweetly, oh, by the way, I was the one who dropped your location pin. He was, to put it mildly, gobsmacked. Suming's brain went into full blue screen mode as he stared at the glowing red magic circle on the very hand holding the dagger. He just couldn't process why she, of all people, would turn him into a human pincushion. Across the way, Yung Tong roared with laughter, declaring that the final ingredient for the recipe was now in place. With a grand gesture, he commanded the activation of their little trap formation. Instantly, a massive, angry red sigil flared to life in the sky directly above Suming. It slammed down, trapping him. Then, pouring salt in the wound, glowing red chains erupted from his back. They wrapped around his body like demonic snakes, effectively cutting off his power supply. He recognized that nasty curse mark it belonged to Ren Xiaomen. The awful truth hit him. This betrayal had been in the works for a long, long time. Zhang Tang swaggered over and casually slung his arm around Xian, who was standing beside him. He mockingly explained that this entire imprisonment setup was a special, custom-tailored gift. prepared just for him, designed to completely cut off his access to his powers. Xian added with a cruel smirk that she was, and always had been, on Team Jiang Tong. She coldly informed Su Ming his only real purpose was to be their glorified tool, all thanks to his rare 9-star talent. They just needed a sucker to go fetch the divine artifact for them. Broken and betrayed on multiple levels, Su Ming collapsed to his knees, letting out a scream of pure rage and anguish. With the hero all tied up and powerless, Zhang Tang ordered his minions to go end his subscription to life and snatch the artifact. The horde charged forward, their cheap, enchanted weapons glowing, ready to deliver the final blow. But just as they were about to reach him, the ground violently exploded, and a massive skeletal hand burst forth like a nightmare flower. It was followed by a whole tidal wave of skeletal warriors who immediately crashed into the attackers. They formed a bony shield around Su Ming, who could only stare in shock, wondering who the heck just sent in the cavalry. And just when you thought it was game over, a wild waifu appears, rocking some slick light purple hair and a mysterious hooded cloak. Su Ming's jaw dropped. It was Ji Yao, the resident necromancer, dropping in like a server-wide hotfix. She planted herself right between our boy and his posse of haters, wielding a staff that probably had some epic stats. She basically told him, "Don't you dare rage quit on me now." Her mission? Deny the bad guys the legendary loot drop. Naturally, Zhang Tong, the lead villain, just scoffed, like he was watching a noob try to solo a raid boss. He totally wrote her off as just another player lining up to feed the enemy team some free experience points. He started his villain monologue, bragging that with dozens of max-level masters on his side, not even the server admin could bail Su Ming out of this one. His goons immediately got into a slap fight with Ji Yao's spooky, scary skeletons, which, for some reason, sent Zhang Tong into a full-blown toddler tantrum. He went full Leroy Jenkins, charging straight at Ji Yao and screaming that anyone who got in his way was getting permabanned from life. While Ji Yao was busy fighting, one of Zhang Tong's cronies had the audacity to yell out a helpful, "Watch your six." But psych, it was the oldest trick in the book, a classic bait-and-switch. She turned, completely bamboozled, right as Zhang Tong got all up in her personal space, swinging his fancy lightning stick at her head. He even had the nerve to say, "No hard feelings, classmate," like a total psycho. Meanwhile, Su Ming, still stuck in crowd control, could only do the classic protagonist thing, watch in slow motion and scream her name as the hit landed. Peak drama. With Ji Yao officially stunned and out of the fight, Zhang Tong saw his golden opportunity. He strolled over to Su Ming and was like, "Dude, stop worrying about her, it's your turn to get deleted." And then, bam, he shoved his glowy blue stabby thing right into Su Ming's chest before leaning in for a little chat. Zhang Tong offered the classic villain ultimatum. Hand over the artifact, and he times might times not uninstall his pathetic life. .exe. But Su Ming wasn't about to go out like a punk. He gripped those magical chains with what little strength he had left. Spitting out a mouthful of what looked like ketchup, he gave his backstabbing buddies a look that could curdle milk. He called them a bunch of toxic griefers as this seriously edgy red and black energy started to swirl around him. It was time for the ultimate Hail Mary play. Su Ming decided to pop his self-destruct ultimate ability. Get ready for it. God-tier technique. Annihilation Burst. Talk about an overpowered skill. A massive explosion erupted from his body, forcing Zhang Tong and Ren Xiaoman to scramble back like they'd just aggroed the world boss by accident. When the dust finally settled, the whole server went quiet. Our boy Su Ming, now with a critical health warning blinking, reached out and whispered Ji Yao's name like the end of a sad movie. He did the dramatic army crawl over to her, cradling her busted-up character model and feeling all the regrets. He was all like, "Why'd you even come? I'm such a noob, and I've failed you so many times." But Ji Yao, pulling out a peaceful smile from her inventory, reached up to boop his face and told him that if this was their final cutscene, then they might as well log off together. As his health bar drained to empty, Su Ming somehow activated one last buff. His sword literally spawned out of thin air and slammed into the ground in front of him, looking like a dramatic new quest marker. Spitting one last declaration at his enemies, he clutched Guy's body tight. Our boy Suing, the so-called God-Slayer, swore a seriously dramatic oath, promising that if he ever got a do-over, he'd hunt down Ren Xiaoman and Zhang Tang and absolutely shred them into confetti. His backstabbing buddies just stared from afar, completely baffled. And then, the light bulb finally went off over Zhang Tang's head. He'd figured out Su Ming's ultimate troll move. The mad lad was planning to take the divine artifact with him to the grave, dragging it right down into the abyss of the death den, just to spite them. With his epic final words echoing, Su Ming basically yelled that if they wanted the divine artifact, they'd have to come and get it, before yeeting himself off the cliff, still holding on to Gi Yao. He plummeted straight into the swirling chaos below, but in his hand, the ring of Tao Defiance lit up like a golden supernova. Everything went white. Su Ming's hand went slack, looking like he'd finally kicked the bucket. But wait, his consciousness snapped back, and he wasn't in some gloomy abyss. He was staring up at a painfully clear blue sky and a school building that looked way too familiar. Totally bewildered, his brain did a full-on blue screen when a voice crackled over a microphone. Some announcer was droning on about the results of the 127th Awakening Ceremony at Xuanjing First Academy. Apparently, a student named Wang Cheng had just successfully awakened, but his new class was Enchanter, a glorified non-combat support class. Meanwhile, Su Ming, now a scrawny teenager himself, was just standing there in a crowd of other kids. He caught some gossip about the school's trash tier luck this year, and that's when the words "awakening ceremony" hit him like a truck. A wave of déjà vu washed over him, as he realized, with absolute pants-wetting shock, that he'd somehow time-traveled. He was 18 years old again, right back on the day of his very own awakening ceremony. As Su Ming stood there, trying to process this cosmic joke, his memories of this exact day came flooding back in glorious 4K. He spotted Wang Chang, the dude everyone used to call Fatty. He remembered clear as day that Wang Qiang had rolled Enchanter in his past life too, confirming this wasn't just some crazy fever dream. To double-check if his brain wasn't fried, he tried to predict the next few students in line. He recalled that Li Songyang was about to become a 2-star warrior, Chen Yu's awakening would be a total flop, and Song Li would luck out and become a battle mage. And just like clockwork, it all happened exactly as he predicted. Li Songyang started celebrating his new warrior class like he'd won the lottery. Next up was Qian Yu, who proceeded to have a full-blown meltdown when his awakening turned out to be a total dud. He was followed by Song Li, who lucked out and pulled the Battle Mage card. As every single event played out exactly like a rerun in his head, the last shred of doubt, Su Ming had simply vanished. A wicked, all-knowing grin spread across his face. Yep, this was real. He'd actually hit the reset button on life. But that grin instantly twisted into pure, unadulterated rage, as the faces of those backstabbers, Yung Tong and Ren Xiaomon, burned in his memory. He knew, deep down in his gut, that this second playthrough was the universe handing him a cheat code to fix his pathetic past and serve up some ice-cold revenge. His vengeful daydreaming was abruptly shattered by a collective gasp from the audience. All eyes were on the stage, where a much younger, more punchable version of Zhang Tong was in the middle of his awakening. He was engulfed in an obnoxiously flashy purple aura that screamed, "Look at me!" The announcer, practically drooling, bellowed that Zhang Tong had unlocked the rare hidden combat class, Demon Puppet Warrior. And get this, with a ridiculous 8-star innate attribute, the entire student body erupted into a frenzy. Of course, the bootlickers immediately started whispering about how you'd expect nothing less from the golden boy of the prestigious Zhang family. Listening to the chatter, Su Ming just stared at his future punching bag with a gaze so cold it could cause frostbite, a burning hatred simmering beneath the surface while the announcer gushed over the school's new prodigy. Just then, Su Ming felt a light tap on his shoulder, pulling him from his murder thoughts. He spun around, and his heart nearly stopped. It was Gi Yao, looking young, vibrant, and alive in her school uniform. "There you are. I've been looking all over for you," she said, then tilted her head, noticing his dumbstruck face. "Hey, you okay?" Shaking off the wave of emotion, he put on a cool facade and casually said, "Oh, me? I was just about to congratulate you in advance." Gi Yao just blinked, completely baffled. "Congratulate me for what?" she asked, clueless, as the horrific memory of her dying in his arms sucker-punched him. Pushing the nightmare away, a truly gentle smile, one he hadn't felt in ages, graced his lips. "It's nothing," he said, his voice soft. "You'll figure it out soon." A wave of pure relief washed over him. He added, meaning every word, "It's just really good to see you again." And right on cue, the announcer's voice boomed. "Next up, Gi Yao." Startled, she gave him one last confused look before heading to the stage. She took a deep breath and placed her hand on the celestial stele. The massive, ancient artifact practically hummed, crackling with an untamed blue energy the moment her fingers made contact. An insane column of power exploded from the stone, completely swallowing her in a blinding light. The announcer's jaw hit the floor as he stammered out that Ji Yao had awakened the hidden necromancer class with a whopping 7-star attribute. The crowd of students just stood there, completely gobsmacked. The whole place was buzzing with total disbelief, but Su Ming just watched with a calm, smug smirk. He was thinking, "Yep, everything's going exactly according to my script." And now, it was his time to shine. The announcer finally called out for Su Ming, and as he strolled towards the stage, Ji tossed him a good luck. The other students, however, were a lot less hopeful. They were whispering trash, like, "There's no way a third hidden class is gonna show up, especially not for a nobody orphan like Su Ming." Okay, hold up. Let's pause for a quick world-building info dump. We're on planet Azure, inside the Dragon Nation, a world dominated by absurdly powerful Awakened. Decades ago, the Great Awakening happened, and ever since then, every single person, once they turn 18, gets a shot at glory in a ceremony to become one of these Awakened. These superpowered individuals completely flipped the world on its head, wielding the power to warp reality and rake in insane amounts of cash. But, as you'd expect, that kind of power comes with a hefty price tag. The Awakened have to constantly battle in endless challenges, squaring off against savage beasts and diving into terrifying, monster-infested dungeons. As he sauntered towards the celestial stele, Su Ming's mind flashed back to his first life. He remembered what it was like being an orphan, surviving on stipends and scholarships. But on the day of his very first awakening ceremony, he was basically chosen by the gods. A ridiculously epic phenomenon lit up the sky, and he awakened a super rare 9-star innate attribute, plus the legendary class known as the God Slayer. Now, standing on this stage in his second life, he was hell-bent on rewriting his own destiny. He stretched his hand out toward the awakening artifact, vowing that today, he was going to make every single one of these doubters eat their words. The moment he touched it, a massive shockwave of purple and pink energy erupted into the air, creating an absolutely mind-blowing light show in the sky. The announcer just stared, his jaw on the floor, wondering if this insane power surge meant they were watching the birth of a 9-star genius, or maybe something even more monstrous. Ji and the other students were just as dumbfounded. Su Ming reached out, preparing to feel that familiar jolt of runes from his original awakening. But this time, something was completely different. A glowing blue sigil blazed to life on his chest, and from it, the divine artifact he had died with began to emerge. The ring of Tao Defiance materialized out of thin air. He was utterly shell-shocked. He realized the ring had somehow hitched a ride back in time with him, but before he could even begin to process that, another completely unexpected event kicked off. A weird sensation started spreading through his entire body, and just like that, a holographic screen blinked into existence right in front of him. A system notification popped up, declaring that the oh-so-dramatic Ultimate God Slayer class system was now successfully latched onto him. It then proudly announced that the system had gifted him a brand spanking new class. And boom, awakening successful. But, hold your horses, this wasn't the class he had last time. Nope, he'd been blessed with something way crazier, a mythic class called the Sword God. Su Ming's jaw just about hit the floor as he stared in pure, unadulterated shock. He was mentally short-circuiting, like, is a mythic class even a thing? And, did I really just get a title that awesome? Meanwhile, the insane crimson energy blasting off Su Ming had the entire crowd completely dumbstruck, even the announcer. The guy was so gobsmacked he could only wonder what kind of busted class could cause a light show like this. Down in the crowd, the peanut gallery was buzzing with theories, and one worrywart piped up, freaking out that it might be a non-combat class. That would mean Su Ming was basically doomed. But Young Tang immediately shot that down. He argued that, with an aura that ridiculously powerful, there was no way it was some lame lifestyle class. Still, as he kept watching, beads of sweat started pouring down his face, thanks to the crushing pressure radiating from Su Ming's energy. It was so intense the poor guy was frozen solid, and Su Ming, he was just standing there, chilling in the middle of this power hurricane. He was casually scrolling through the info on the shiny golden panel in front of his face. Yep, he confirmed it. Awakened class, Sword God. Definitely not the God Slayer he remembered from his past life. He gave the system interface a poke, which ran a quick ID scan and was like, "Confirmed, you are indeed Su Ming." And with that, it flashed up his brand new status window. His class was listed as Sword God, and get this, he possessed a golden tier talent. It was called Universal Ascension, which basically gave him the cheat code to level up or evolve, literally anything. Su Ming's brain officially blue-screened. He quickly put 2 and 2 together. A golden talent was a whole tier above the legendary 9-star class he'd awakened last time. A ridiculously smug grin plastered itself across his face as he realized his new power should totally clown on the old god class. Giddy with excitement to see his new OP abilities, he swiped open the skill interface. And just like that, his hype train crashed and burned. The skill screen was completely blank, showing a big fat 0 and a single, lonely message. No abilities have been awakened. Oh, Suming was absolutely fuming. He literally grabbed the holographic panel, screaming in his head about how a golden rank talent could possibly come with 0 skills. While our boy was having his little meltdown, the audience was getting fidgety, totally confused by the awkward silence. Finally, the announcer broke the tension, shouting out, "Hey kid, you done with your power-up sequence yet or what?" Suming was absolutely fuming, glaring at a skill interface that was completely empty. He'd just awakened a supposed god-tier class, for crying out loud, and he had 0 abilities, not a single one. He was seriously wondering if the system was just messing with his head. Then, as if on cue, the panel flickered to life with a brand new message. It basically said, "Your complaint has been noted. We will now resume the tutorial." A new prompt directed his attention to the ring of Tao Defiance just chilling in the air in front of him. Completely baffled, he stared at the ring as it started to pulse with light. The system then coolly announced it had successfully identified the divine artifact. The very second that ring was identified, the system panel lit up like a Christmas tree, and a gargantuan pillar of golden light erupted right from Suming's spot, rocketing straight into the stratosphere. The resulting shockwave was so intense it blasted outwards, forcing the announcer, who also happened to be the Academy's principal, to brace himself for impact. High above the celestial stelae, a massive, glowing, multicolored star materialized, with the number 10 shining brightly at its core. The principal's eyes practically bugged out of his head. He stammered in pure disbelief, recognizing the legendary symbol for a 10-star innate attribute. His voice boomed through the microphone like a thunderclap, announcing that Suming had awakened a 10-star hidden class, Swordmaster. The crowd went absolutely bananas, screaming about the heaven-defying talent of a 10-star attribute, a tier reserved for the absolute monsters at the top of the national rankings. Zhang Tong could only stare, completely shell-shocked. Another student was overheard saying he thought Zhang Tong's 8-star awakening was already insane, but then Suming just went and dropped a fully maxed-out 10-star attribute on everyone's heads. The principal, beaming like a proud father, declared it a historic year for the Academy. Not only did they get multiple hidden classes, but now they had a true chosen one with a 10-star attribute. He admitted that while the Swordmaster class wasn't exactly S-tier, with a 10-star innate talent to back it up, Suming's future potential was basically limitless. As a reward for this spectacle, the principal announced he would personally gift Suming a complete set of cultivation-aiding items. However, not everyone was on the hype train. Whispers of what a waste started to spread like wildfire. Some students flat out called it a tragedy, explaining that the Swordmaster was a well-known, bottom-tier class. They elaborated that it was the definition of a mediocre, jack-of-all-trades class, forcing its user to train in both ranged and close combat, splitting their stats between physical and magical attacks, making it the textbook example of a fundamentally underpowered and useless class. The rest of the students erupted in laughter at his spectacular misfortune, absolutely mocking the joke of a 10-star talent getting saddled with such a bottom-tier class. A few good Samaritans tried to defend him, suggesting that with enough grinding, even a Swordmaster could become a half-decent damage dealer. And with Suming's god-tier talent, he was basically destined to pull it off. But the haters immediately shot them down, arguing the class takes twice the work for half the payout, and that he'd be lucky to even clear a tutorial-level dungeon. Up on the stage, Suming heard every single one of their dismissive words. He tilted his head ever so slightly, his eyes cast in shadow, thinking about how they all saw his Swordmaster class as utter trash. As the chatter from the cheap seats continued, Guy came bouncing up to Suming with a dazzling smile, and she showered him with congratulations. Suming returned the kind gesture. Guy Yao then told him to just tune out all the nonsense, because awakening a 10-star talent was a huge deal. She admitted the Swordmaster class might be a bit squishy in the early game, but she was absolutely certain that with his level of talent, it wouldn't even be an issue. Suming gave her a warm smile and thanked her, promising that their pathetic little comments weren't getting to him. He then added with a sly smirk that them underestimating him was exactly what he was counting on, which left poor Zhao looking completely bewildered. Their little chat was cut short when the announcer called the next student. The crowd went absolutely nuts as Ren Xiaoman, the school's #1 princess, glided forward. Zhang Tang was right there, cheering her on like a fanboy. Guy commented on just how popular she was, but Su Ming remained dead silent. Instead of watching the spectacle, Su Ming simply turned on his heel and started walking off. Guy called out, completely puzzled, reminding him that the ceremony wasn't even over yet. Su Ming replied with ice in his voice, not even bothering to look back, that he wasn't interested. As he made his exit, a flood of painful memories from his previous life came crashing down on him. He remembered how Ren Xiaoman had used him for all he was worth, only to betray and kill him without a shred of hesitation. He recalled the vow he made with his dying breath and steeled his resolve for payback in this second life. Later, Su Ming wandered through the city, observing that on the surface, the world hadn't changed one bit from his memories. However, he knew deep down that some things were very, very different now. Besides his new garbage class, he pulled up his system and discovered a little gem of a skill called total concealment. This legendary tier skill gave him the power to hide, or just flat-out rewrite the info on his equipment, his class, and all of his other skills. Whoa, hold up, he instantly recognized that as one of the 4 cheat-level skills he'd snagged in his past life. That thought sparked another memory, the ridiculously OP ring of Tao Defiance. He stared down at his hands, completely dumbfounded. It finally clicked. The divine artifact had literally followed him through time like a lost puppy. As Su Ming was admiring his new bling, the system panel decided to light up again. A notification popped up. Now loading divine artifact. As the ring officially became part of his gear, another message flashed. Bam! Su Ming had inherited a chunk of the skills from his old school gods class. He just stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. How is this even possible? He muttered. I got skills from my old class when my new one is the sword god. Is this a bug or a feature? A slick, detailed status screen materialized before him, listing his name, Su Ming. Level 1, with a perfectly balanced set of base stats. His class was confirmed, the one-of-a-kind mythic world unique sword god. And his talent? The ridiculously broken universal ascension. The skills section was now loaded with 4 absolute bangers. Godslayer's Blade, Total Concealment, Shadow Step, and Insightful Eye. With this god-tier loadout, a wicked little plan started brewing in Su Ming's mind. He recalled an old saying, a man with empty pockets is innocent, but a man with treasure is a walking target. To avoid getting used like a pawn by every big shot out there, especially since he was still a level 1 squishy, he knew he had to play it cool, while hiding his 10-star talent was basically impossible. He decided he had to keep all information about his true mythic class, the Sword God, under total lockdown. He swore to himself he would crush this second chance and not repeat the boneheaded mistakes of his past. Thanks to his future knowledge, he knew the beginner dungeon challenge was set to drop on the second day after the awakening ceremony. With his brain full of spoilers and a set of OP skills, Su Ming figured the beginner dungeon would be a total cakewalk. His mission was simple, power level faster than everyone else and hoard all the best gear for himself. To pull that off, he decided to go say hello to the dungeon's final boss from the get-go. But first things first, he needed a weapon that wasn't a glorified toothpick. Meanwhile, way up in a swanky room in a skyscraper named the Palace, a completely different kind of drama was unfolding. The 2 lovebirds, Zhang Tang and Ren Xian, were having a little chat. Ren Xiaoman teased Zhang Tang, bringing me to a place like this right after the ceremony? How forward of you. Zhang Tang, clearly still salty, snapped back, don't even mention that stupid ceremony. Su Ming totally stole my thunder. Ren Xiaoman, however, was already cooking up a scheme. Oh, don't be such a big baby, she purred. She leaned in, explaining, so what if Su Ming is just times a swordmaster? That just means he's a useful tool waiting to be sharpened, don't you think? The kid's awakening stats were off the charts. She promised him that Su Ming would be a goldmine for them to exploit down the line. Hooked, Yung Tang leaned in, asking her to spill the beans. A sly grin spread across Ren Xiaoman's face as she flashed him her phone screen. Zhang Teng's face went from a bored scowl to wide-eyed astonishment in a heartbeat. With a look that could freeze hell over, Ren Xian laid out her devious little scheme. She was dead certain that all it would take was a little shiny lure, and Su Ming would bite. And then, just like last time, they'd have their puppet right back on his strings. Meanwhile, following his own grand design, Su Ming rocked up to a towering skyscraper, a veritable shopping mall for everything that goes slash and boom. He rode the elevator up to the 12th floor and was met by a peppy employee at the weapons emporium. Strolling through the bustling marketplace, he noticed the place was crawling with fresh-faced newbies, all buzzing about their first crack at the novice dungeon trial. He caught snippets of conversation, mostly broke rookies whining about how they'd have to grind for ages in dungeons just to afford a half-decent toothpick. Just then, a commotion from a packed crowd snagged Suming's attention. Turns out, they were all gawking at a ridiculously flashy, glowing, blue sword, grandly named the Tyrant's Frostblade, a supposed diamond-rank weapon, allegedly crafted by some legendary great sword master. The crowd was practically drooling, completely mesmerized by its supposed power, which word on the street was, could flash freeze a monster's blood in its veins. But their jaws dropped even harder at the price tag, a cool 1 million advent coins. As they all oohed and awed, a knowing smirk played on Suming's lips. Oh, he remembered this little beauty from his past life. It was a complete piece of junk. And the scam artist peddling it? Yeah, he'd be doing hard time pretty soon. His trip down memory lane was cut short by a sharp voice. He turned to find a chic woman with short gray hair, flanked by two guys who were basically human-shaped walls. She cut right to the chase, asking if he was the one and only Suming. He shot the question right back at her. The woman introduced herself with an air of importance as Zhang Lan, the vice director of the mighty Zhang Anan group, sliding a crisp business card his way. Suming casually took the card, feigning ignorance. "Don't think we've met," he said. Zhang Lan completely bulldozed past his remark, projecting her voice for all the broke newbies to hear, announcing that on behalf of the Zhang Anan group, she was picking up his entire tab for the day. Everything. On the house. Then, dropping the sugar-sweet act, she mentioned a small favor he could do for her. "What kind of favor?" Suming asked, already knowing there's no such thing as a free lunch. She nodded to one of her human-shaped walls, who promptly presented him with a photo. It showed a young, smiling girl, though her eyes were mysteriously obscured, and she was framed by a sea of delicate white flowers. Zhanglan laid it all out. The girl was her little sister, Zhang Yuning. Turns out, she was a freshman at his school and a freshly minted awakened. She then casually mentioned she'd already done her homework on his awakening, knowing full well about his legendary 10-star talent. She figured that for a guy with his kind of firepower, the novice dungeon would be a total cakewalk. After reminding him that only newbies could get in, she finally got to the point. She wanted him to party up with her sis and act as her personal bodyguard to guarantee she aced the trial. After a brief pause, Suming hit her with a hard pass, deadpanning that he wasn't interested before turning to leave. Zhanglan was completely stunned. She screeched after his retreating figure, offering him literally any weapon in the shop if he'd just say yes. But his only response was the sound of his footsteps. Absolutely fuming, she thought to herself. Since when does some broke kid who hit the lottery get to turn me down? Right when Zhanglan was about to blow a gasket, Suming came to a halt. He turned back, a perfectly calm look on his face, and asked, "Oh, is that a fact?" He then pointed a finger at the most ridiculously expensive weapon in the entire store and declared, "Fine, I'll take the Tyrant's Frostblade. You know, the display-only sword worth a whopping 1 million advent coins." Zhanglan saw red. She was absolutely convinced he was just trying to fleece her. She spat that he was just messing with her and sneered, "You really think a nobody like you is worth 1 million coins?" Suming just shrugged, reminding her that her exact words were, "any weapon." He told her that if she was going to Welsh on the deal, then there was no deal. Rocking a confident smirk, he decided to offer her a little pro tip. He told her to pass a message to her sister. Maybe she should try preparing with, actual effort. The implication was clear. Some things can't be bought with cash. And strangely, Zhanglan's fury started to vanish. It was replaced by a smirk of pure intrigue. She found this Suming guy fascinating, and had to admit she was the one who screwed up. With that, she spun around and left with her goon squad. The gawking crowd was completely floored, whispering about how that one student just ran circles around the bigwigs from the young H group. Just as they were clearing out, Suming's phone lit up with a new message. A quick look showed it was from Ren Xiaoman. The message was a perfect carbon copy of what he remembered. She was asking if he'd secretly liked her all this time, claiming she'd suddenly had a total change of heart, and asking him to meet her on the roof of the academic building that night. Suming thought, with a chilly smirk, that even though he hadn't awakened as the God Slayer this time, Ren Xian was still playing the same old manipulative games, but remembering his promise of payback, he just fired off a quick message agreeing to her little meetup. With that chore out of the way, Suming got back to the main quest, finding himself some new gear. He casually approached a shop assistant, gesturing toward a pile of jagged, rock-like things called sword stones. The assistant explained they were basically weapon loot boxes, with a slim chance of dropping a silver rank weapon, but she made sure to warn him that it was all a game of chance, and most of the stones were loaded with nothing but the lowest grade junk. To her utter shock, Suming just grinned and said that was exactly what he was hoping for. He gave her his brilliant reasoning. Why waste a fortune on a silver weapon that would be obsolete in a week, when it was a much smarter play to gamble on getting one from a dirt-cheap rock? Of course, as he gazed at the stones, he knew that for him, this wasn't really a gamble at all. The hilarious truth was, he could literally read the item data inside the stones. This little cheat code was another gift he'd brought back from his previous life, the overpowered skill known as the Eye of Insight. A system panel confirmed this legendary skill gave his eyes the power to see the absolute truth of all things. Using this ability, he confidently scooped up one of the stones like he was picking out groceries. He knew a normal silver weapon would cost a poor soul hundreds or even thousands of advent coins. But by using his personal hacks to find one in a bargain bin stone, it was an insane steal for a broke student like himself. As Suming sat there, admiring the weapon stone, his actions inevitably drew the attention of some local idiots. One of them, a kid with obnoxious blonde hair, recognized him as the lunatic who had just given the powerful Jong-un group the cold shoulder. The blonde punk and his two cronies swaggered over to Suming, smirking. The leader mocked him for holding a garbage weapon stone, cackling at the very idea that anyone would turn down a golden ticket from a major corporation just to bet on a piece of actual junk. They all started calling Suming an idiot. Suming, however, was completely unbothered. He instantly recognized the blonde bully as Yang Ding, a spoiled rich kid from his past life whose only hobby was making life miserable for underclassmen. Finding the whole encounter a bit of a pain, Suming decided to troll them for his own amusement. He calmly looked Yang Ding in the eye and proposed a little bet, for a cool 5,000 advent coins, that he could pull a silver rank weapon right out of the rock he was holding. After a moment of complete, stunned silence, Yang Ding and his goons absolutely erupted in laughter. Thinking Suming was a complete moron, Yang Ding started running his mouth, sneering that there was a 99.99% chance the rock was worthless junk, and that he'd never seen a bigger fool so eager to set his own money on fire. Suming just shot back with a smirk. We're about to find out who's really the fool here. Taking the bait hook, line, and sinker, Yang Ding happily agreed to the bet as a crowd of gawkers started to form. Suming declared he was cracking it open right then and there, warning the chump not to even think about weaseling out of their deal. Yang Ding just cackled, telling him he should be more worried about the 5,000 coins he was about to be short. With every eye locked on him, Suming casually activated his Eye of Insight. His entire perception shifted, letting him see the blazing red aura of the sword trapped within the stone. With a confident battle cry, he shattered the rock with a single strike. A blinding crimson light erupted from the rubble as a powerful sword launched into the air, leaving Yang Ding, his cronies, and the entire crowd frozen in slack-jawed disbelief as Suming nonchalantly snatched the weapon by its handle. A system notification instantly popped into view, identifying his new prize. It was a black iron crimson sword, a low-grade silver weapon that came with a special affix called Crimson Drinker, which let it feast on the blood of monsters to heal its user. He stood there, enjoying the dead silence from the peanut gallery. Suming held up his new blade, admiring what a fine piece of work it was. A cold, calculating look crossed his face as he thought, this little beauty would be the perfect accessory for his date with Ren Xian later that night. Yang Ding and his lackeys were practically statues, their brains still trying to reboot. They simply couldn't compute that Suming had just pulled a silver rank weapon from a trash-tier stone. Holding the sword, Suming casually commented, it's not too shabby. Especially this lifesteal perk, he mused aloud. Guess I don't need to waste money on a healer for the next dungeon trial. A system panel confirmed it, a silver rank black steel sword with a bonus of 10% lifesteal. As Yang Ding's face went pale with panic, Suming pointed the tip of the blade right at him, reminding the bully that a bet's a bet, and those 5,000 advent coins now belonged to him. Defeated and humiliated, Yang Ding transferred the money. As he stormed off, he shrieked that he would never forget this embarrassment. Suming just called after him. Some friendly advice, don't write checks your skills can't cash. The shop assistant stared on, completely dumbfounded, realizing it had been literal years since a customer had found an actual weapon in one of those rocks. With his newfound cash, Su-ming casually strolled back to the counter to grab a scabbard, nonchalantly asking if 5,000 coins would cover it. The assistant, practically tripping over himself, stammered that it was more than enough. He snagged a fancy golden inlaid, silver rank scabbard that cut weapon durability loss by a whopping 50%. Su-ming gave a satisfied nod, knowing this little accessory would save him a ton of headache on the sword's upkeep. Just as he slid the blade into its new home, a system notification flashed before his eyes. It tempted him with a question. Did he want to unleash a hidden function called weapon manifestation? He smirked and declined, figuring it wasn't the right time for that particular party trick. First things first, he thought. This shiny new toy needed a serious rank up. Later, while cutting through a park, Su-ming mulled over his current predicament. He had to admit, for a guy who'd awakened as the sword god, he was comically short on actual class skills. But what his class lacked in skills, it made up for with an absurdly broken, primal talent. Universal Ascension, a one-of-a-kind ability letting him upgrade any item's quality, just once. This was the cheat code that made his mythic class live up to the hype. Gripping his sword, he decided to test it. A system window promptly appeared, announcing the activation. Universal Ascension activated. Ascension successful. New effect. Crimson Drinker obtained. In an instant, the sword was enveloped in a menacing, pulsating red aura. A final notification detailed the weapon's glorious new status. A high silver rank crimson black steel sword. Its Crimson Drinker perk was now juiced up, siphoning a target's very lifeblood on contact. And to top it off, it gained a brand new skill, Bloodthirst. This new beauty granted a temporary +5 boost to all stats for 30 seconds after icing a monster. Su-ming couldn't help but grin at the insane upgrade. With his prep work finally done, he unleashed the hidden weapon manifestation, knowing tomorrow's beginner dungeon was about to become his personal playground. As night fell, Su-ming found himself on the rooftop of the academic building. He cut a sharp silhouette against the sprawling, neon-drenched cityscape, his newly empowered sword resting comfortably in his hand. Ren Xian was already waiting. She turned, a killer smile on her face as she greeted him, teasingly scolding him for making her wait. Her smile evaporated in a heartbeat, because without a single word, Su-ming swung his blade right at her. A shriek tore from her throat as she desperately dodged, the sword burying itself deep into the concrete ledge where she'd just been standing. She stared, eyes wide with terror and confusion, demanding to know what he was doing. With an ice-cold gaze that promised nothing but pain, Su-ming informed her, "I'm here to collect a debt." A gut-wrenching flashback slammed into him the bitter end of his previous life. He was cradling the fading Ji Yao, while that snake, Ren Xian, watched with stone-cold indifference. Ren Xian, looking completely lost and pissed off, snapped, demanding to know what kind of nonsense he was spouting. She tried to gaslight him, reminding him she'd just said yes to his confession as she shoved her phone in his face, displaying a chat log where he'd supposedly poured his heart out and asked to date her. She practically shrieked in frustration. "You're the one who chased me. You wanted this." She played the victim, whining about why he was suddenly being so cruel to her. Su-ming just stood there, his face an unreadable mask of steel, staring her down with an icy, smug-as-hell smirk. "Oh, you're right about the confession," he drawled, except that was in a whole other lifetime. His thoughts plunged back into the past, replaying the whole charade. He remembered her as the campus queen, the untouchable school idol. And him? He was just some lonely orphan. He vividly recalled the day after the first awakening ceremony. He was feeling totally crushed when she glided over, flashing that picture-perfect kind smile and asking if he was okay. From that moment on, the poor fool thought he'd finally found someone who cared, which led to the cringe-worthy text confession, the cheesy romantic dates, and everything that came after. But that whole happy illusion was obliterated by the memory of one single photograph, her and Jiang Tang, looking way too cozy. It was the ultimate proof of her backstabbing. Snapping back to the present, Su-ming's face twisted into a mask of pure fury as he roared, "It was all a damn lie." He pointed a finger right at her, his voice dripping with contempt. "I know everything. I know about your dirty little schemes with Jiang Tang and how you were just playing me for a fool." Ren Xian looked like she'd been struck by lightning, stammering that he was talking crazy and trying desperately to deny it all. But Su-ming wasn't letting up for a second. He sneered, "Oh, you know damn well if I'm lying or not. That whole elegant, perfect princess act? It's all fake." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper, and hissed, "The real you is just a shallow, two-faced opportunist." And with that, Ren Xian's composure completely shattered, her face contorting in raw fury as she finally dropped the sweet girl charade. She screeched at him. "What could a nobody like you possibly know? You're just an orphan," she spat venomously. "If your talent wasn't even a little bit useful, you would have never had the privilege of even breathing the same air as me." Then came the threats. She howled that both she and Jiang Tong would make him pay for humiliating her like this. Suming hit her threats with a smirk so smug it could curdle milk. He pretty much dared her to try something, but slyly suggested she should be more concerned about how this little drama bomb would shatter her carefully polished pure as jade public persona. That final jab was the one that sent her flying off the handle. Absolutely seething with rage, she scrambled for the sword Suming had casually jabbed into the concrete and took a wild swing at his head. As the blade whistled towards him, Suming had a moment of déjà vu, thinking to himself that this was exactly how she acted in his past life. Except this time, he was ready for it. Just as the sword was about to give him a new haircut, sinister tendrils of red energy burst forth from the blade itself, stopping it cold in midair and leaving Ren Xiaoman looking completely dumbfounded. Suming explained that he'd seen this move coming a mile away, since he was well aware of her talent for backstabbing. A system notification popped up, confirming his weapon's Crimson Drinker ability was now online. The creepy red energy tentacles surged from the blade and coiled around Ren Xiaoman like a hungry snake. Suming then revealed his master plan. The very moment he'd targeted her with his weapon's skill, her fate was completely sealed. A tendril lashed out, smacking her square in the face. She let loose a blood-curdling scream, wailing that her precious face was totally ruined. As she crumpled to the ground in a pathetic heap, Suming stood over her and coldly informed her she had nobody to blame but herself. He was about to launch into his big, "This is just the start of my revenge" speech, but she had the audacity to interrupt him, screaming that she was going to get Jiang Tong to unalive him. Completely unfazed, Suming just recalled his sword, which promptly dematerialized back into his inventory. He then turned his back and walked off, telling her to go ahead and let Jiang Tong know he could come and get some whenever he felt ready. He declared that today's little slap was his official severance package. As he left her sobbing on the rooftop, he mused that this blade had also served to slice away the last remnants of the affection he once cherished. Some time later, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a little gift from the academy, with a message from Principal Wang himself. He was getting a pat on the back for his awakening, along with a reward package to help him get prepped for the beginner dungeon. The care package was loaded with one fortification pill, a combat gear package, and a sweet 10,000 advent coins. The next day started bright and early at 6 a.m., with Suming staring at the fortification pill from the principal. He had to admit, it was a pretty generous handout, but figured it was just a pity prize for awakening a supposedly weak swordmaster class. Despite his epic 10-star talent, without a second thought, he popped the pill. He immediately recoiled, complaining that it tasted like absolute garbage. But the foul taste was instantly forgotten as a brilliant golden aura exploded around him, followed by a system notification that nearly made his jaw hit the floor. That nasty little pill had just jacked him up with a +10 to Constitution and a whopping 100 experience points. It was more than enough to skyrocket him straight to level 2 and hand him 10 free attribute points to play with. And just as his status screen was refreshing with his newfound gains, a brand new passive talent blinked into existence. It was called Innate Sword Body, a ridiculously OP talent that meant he'd basically been born with a sword in his soul. This let him learn literally any sword skill he wanted, completely ignoring all those pesky level or class restrictions. A smirk crept across Suming's face. Yep, just as expected from his legendary 10-star talent, he could unlock broken abilities just by leveling up. Overflowing with a fresh wave of confidence, he let out a cocky grin and declared it was time to show these fools his true power in the novice dungeon. He strolled up to the First Academy's novice dungeon area, a chaotic plaza buzzing with students and shimmering portals. It wasn't long before a pack of his classmates swarmed him, and what do you know, it was the same clowns who'd been mocking his class just yesterday, now practically begging to team up. Suddenly, they were all singing praises about his 10-star talent and the principal's generous gift, acting like the dungeon would be a total cakewalk with him around. They even offered up their own classes to support the swordmaster's so-called weaknesses, clearly hoping to leech a high score off his hard work. Suming felt nothing but disgust for these two-faced hypocrites, remembering the scornful looks they gave him just the day before, so he shut them down with a blunt no. He casually lied that he already had a team, a little fib that was immediately overheard by Ji Yao. She scurried over, looking completely baffled, asking when in the world he'd found a team. She explained that she'd shown up super early just so she could be the first to ask him. Suming, completely caught in his lie, fumbled for an explanation, telling her his goals in this dungeon weren't about the usual loot and glory, and that he was worried she'd get hurt. He then leaned in close and whispered his real, insane plan. He was going to solo the entire dungeon. Just as Ji Yao was trying to wrap her head around that bombshell, they were cut off by some blue-haired pretty boy sporting an overly confident smirk. The guy smoothly introduced himself as Jans, a 9-star demon hunter ranger no less, and formally invited Suming to join his elite team. Suming instantly recognized Jans from his past life, and without a single moment of hesitation, shot his offer down cold. Before Jans could even process the rejection, Ji Yao jumped in to run interference. She casually slung an arm over Suming's shoulders, declaring to the peanut gallery that he was already on her team, so they could all buzz off. The other hopefuls, Jans included, muttered their apologies and promptly scattered. As the crowd thinned, Suming gave Gi a grateful look, thinking to himself that she was surprisingly dependable when she wanted to be. As Suming stood there with Gi Yao, he shot a quick glance at a clock, realizing the dungeon's opening time was just around the corner, and, right on cue, a gigantic blue portal began to vortex into existence, and an epic voice boomed out, announcing that the 127th Novice Dungeon Trial was officially live. From the swirling portal, a holographic projection of Principal Wang flickered to life, looking like he'd just rolled out of bed. The principal sheepishly apologized for sleeping in before laying down the rules for the mandatory one-day ordeal. He explained that every student was automatically signed up, no excuses. Inside, they would rack up points based on how much they actually contributed. He strongly, and I mean times strongly asterisk, advised them to party up to increase their odds of not getting unalived and actually clearing the challenge within 24 hours. While the principal was droning on, Gi Yao turned to chat with Suming, only to find he'd pulled a complete ninja vanish. She blinked, scanning the area in total confusion. But before anyone could even process it, Principal Wang officially hit the big red button, declaring the dungeon open. At that exact second, a lone figure blasted past the stunned students and swan-dived headfirst into the swirling portal. The crowd went absolutely nuts, screaming that some maniac had already jumped in, quickly identifying the lone wolf as the legendary 10-star student, Suming himself. The moment he materialized inside the dungeon, Suming was slammed with a massive wave of déjà vu. He smirked, remembering how his past self was a cocktail of pure terror and giddy excitement. Then, a powerful, disembodied voice echoed through the very air, welcoming the fresh-faced novices. It laid out the simple truth: the dungeon was a place of both great peril and even greater loot. To punch their ticket out, all they had to do was defeat the standard-issue boss. However, it also dropped a juicy hint about a high-difficulty route for those with the guts to seek out far superior rewards. A wicked grin spread across Suming's face. Suming declared his new mission objective, loud and clear for only himself to hear. In this life, he was skipping the tutorial and going straight for the ultimate hidden boss to absolutely demolish it. He found himself dropped into a dense, moon-drenched jungle, which the system helpfully identified as the Raging Tide Forest, a measly level F zone. He instantly recalled that the map for this starter dungeon gets a complete refresh every single year, which meant this entire layout was brand new, and nothing like the one he memorized in his past life. He also knew that the spawn points were completely randomized for every challenger who entered. That meant route planning had to be done on the move, and more importantly, the monsters he was about to farm would be a total surprise, just to add another delicious layer of unpredictability to the mix. Kicking off his solo adventure, it didn't take long for him to stumble upon a seriously nasty-looking enemy. We're talking a colossal, living tree monster, rocking a hairdo of pure, roaring fire and a face carved to give you nightmares. But our boy, thanks to his handy-dandy past life memories, knew this thing was a glorified turret. It would try to yoink its victims into a fiery embrace with its vines, but he wasn't here to clear trash mobs. Nah, his eyes were on the real prize, the hidden boss. So, he figured it was probably a good idea to just dip on this overgrown fire hazard and pulled up his holographic map. He started plotting his route, smirking to himself about why he'd rushed in solo to get a massive head start, of course. His mission: scout the brand new layout and snatch up all the key items needed to summon the big bad. Even though the dungeon map got a fresh coat of paint every year, he knew the core mechanics for triggering the boss fight were basically copy-pasted. He had to hustle before a bunch of clueless noobs flooded the place and made his item hunt a total nightmare. With his master plan locked and loaded, he shot off like a rocket, effortlessly weaving through the dense forest. A little while later, at 7:30 in the morning, the next batch of hopefuls finally decided to show up. A girl with light blue hair and her two boy buddies cautiously scanned the eerily quiet clearing. They noticed that, hey, there wasn't another soul in sight, and jumped to the brilliant conclusion that the coast was clear. Of course, that cozy sense of security was instantly obliterated when the girl heard a rustle in the trees and screeched a warning to her team. They all craned their necks up just in time to see another student come crashing through the leaves like a sack of potatoes. This dude, armed with a hammer, face planted nearby, screaming his lungs out for help. The welcoming committee could only gawk in pure shock as the reason for his panicked sprinting made its grand entrance. Say hello to two giant, monstrous rats with glowing red eyes straight out of a horror flick. The moment they recognized these bloodthirsty critters, whatever courage the students had instantly evaporated, and in a brilliant display of teamwork, they decided to split up and run for their lives. Meanwhile, back in the plaza, the true danger of this little field trip was becoming crystal clear. At 7:31 in the morning, a live feed flashed above the portal, announcing that a whopping 3 challengers had already become rat chow, courtesy of the bloodthirsty rats. The highest-ranked casualty was a 6-star big shot named Li Dabao. Ji Yao, who was still desperately trying to recruit a party, was absolutely floored. Panicked that a 6-star talent got taken out faster than last week's trash, she started frantically yelling for everyone to hurry up and get their teams together, screaming that the poor souls inside were basically monster bait and needed backup as soon as possible. Speaking of which, back inside the raging tide forest, things were looking pretty bleak. Our blue-haired damsel was currently sprinting for her life. She found herself alone and in pretty rough shape. In the ensuing chaos, she'd been completely separated from her squad and had no clue where she was. As she desperately tried to get her bearings, she felt an ominous new presence nearby. Her head snapped up, and that's when she saw it. The silhouette of a monstrous ape-like beast was perched high in the trees. The creature then dropped to the ground with a heavy thud, its glowing crimson eyes glaring down at her with pure, unadulterated malice. She was absolutely paralyzed with fear, able to do nothing but watch as the giant beast lunged straight for her. In what she thought was her final moment, she squeezed her eyes shut and screamed for anyone, absolutely anyone, to come save her. Out of nowhere, a flash of red light blazed past her. In a truly breathtaking display of speed, Su Ming made his grand entrance.